Welcome to my budget deck channel where I try to make decks as cheap and playable as possible, and if that is something you'd be interested in, then why not subscribe. Today I had a look at one of the newer decks in Master Duel, and hear me out before you say anything. Yes, we do run a small tiny Magistus engine, which is, it's not really a Magistus engine because there's not really any Magistus cards you can go into, but it has a few other kind of usages. And first things first, this is a Go Second version. I had a look at the cards, and yes, there's some crazy things you can do. You'll probably have already clicked through like any of the good videos that tell you how to FTK first turn, how to do crazy shenanigans with Cyberstein, that you can go into Gigant X because your monsters are machine monsters. And with this, you can search Cyberstein, and this deck doesn't need its normal summon, so you can go into crazy stuff like Exterior and whatnot. There's so many things that you can do, but this is a version that focuses more on the actual Vaylantz playstyle. Not to say that the other decks don't use Vaylantz as an engine or as, like, well, the main deck, but this is kind of more what it felt like after reading the cards. This is what called out to me that this deck wants to be played kind of second, because most of the effects had to do with interacting with the opponent's kind of stuff, and you don't really have any spell traps that do stuff during your opponent's turn and whatnot. So I felt like, let's create a version that utilizes the main playstyle of Vaylantz a bit, and yeah, let's try to do this in the cheapest possible way. And I started out with stuff like Ash Blossom, one Infinite Impermanence, because if you go in second, you obviously have the problem that you kind of want to be running cards so your opponent's plays don't get too much out of control, so you can actually do stuff when it's your turn and are not completely locked out of all of your plays. So stuff like Max C might come in handy as well if you want to stock up on this. Effect Veiler, all kinds of hand traps that you could be running are not bad as well. But now let's get right into what I thought of this specific card, and why I chose this one is first of all, you do not need your normal summon, so this is quite nice, and you do run some bricks. So this whole cards thing that you can draw a card and then tuck one back into your deck can be quite helpful, especially if you're trying to keep it kind of budgety, because you want to have you want to avoid the scenario where you draw both of the field spells, because then you can't activate them. So this is kind of a way to get around this. Plus, also, this card can technically pop a spell trap on the field, which can be one of your Vaylantz monsters. So you go to the extra deck and you can pendulum summon them. It can also be one of the field spells, because if you can't kill your opponent, you might not want your opponent to have one of the effects of the field spell, and then you could basically pop this one. So this goes back. Also, if this card is normal summoned, this can be, especially going second, either be a spell trap card destruction, which is very important because some decks have cards that stop you from special summoning, floodgatey kind of stuff. You can get rid of this, or at least force a negate with that one. Or technically, if you want to invest a tiny bit more, you already have a Magistus core, you could run one Yugioh, because then you can get rid of one of your opponent's negates, which can also be nice. So far, this is all this card does. You could extend the plays a bit, because you could add like one Crowley, then search it with Artemis. Artemis is just in here. You could cut it if you want to keep the deck really cheap. This card is in here, so you can search a second one. When you use the tuck back effect, that you could just tuck the Endymion back, and you can actually kind of like gain from the whole engine a bit, and not just reshuffle some stuff in your deck as well. You could add one Roa to go in during the next turn, because sadly you cannot pendulum summon this card out, which would have been quite nice. But since you can only special summon monsters that are not from the extra deck, that are Vaylantz cards, after you used lots of your Vaylantz card effects, so that's a bit problematic. But then you could go into like the Synchro stuff the next turn, because you will have Endymion in your graveyard, and then you can do all of this kind of shenanigans. That could be a thing you could be doing as well. So there's lots of stuff that you could be doing. You could be using Crowley as well, because you have quite a lot of spellcasters, and technically if you send them to the graveyard, you could do stuff with Cross Sheep, and there's a whole lot of stuff that you can be doing, but I wouldn't focus on it. But if you want to try out something that's a bit crazier, then that is one of the things. Next up, Jizukiru, the Star Destroying Kaiju. This card, well, it's good going second. It has a bit of a problem because you kind of have to use it at the start of the turn, which can be problematic if you haven't thought out your turn, because the placement of this in whichever zone you want to place it can be somewhat important. So you have to have thought this through at least a tiny bit, because With the field spell in conjunction, you can then get this Kaiju. Usually if your opponent doesn't have much other kind of stuff, then you can put the Kaiju into your opponent's spell trap zone, and then with your fusion monster, you can give it back to your hand, because it comes back to your hand, burn your opponent for 3,300 damage, and boost this card's attack by 1,650, which is quite strong. So this is very close to like OTKing potential at this point already. So this is quite a neat little thing. You have lots of stuff where you can give this card back to your hand. For example, Hojo can get this card back to your hand if it's in the spell trap card zone from your opponent. You have Asophiel, which can get this card back to your hand, but you cannot use this card, you cannot special summon it to your opponent's field again if in the meantime you use the effect of some of the Vaylantz monsters, because then they lock you to special summoning only stuff from the extra deck that is not a Vaylantz card. So has a bit of an issue. But you actually want to be going for the Kaiju that has the highest attack. Technically, till certain cards are banned, you could play like the Wind Kaiju because of the barrier structure and whatnot, but this card will be banned soon, so it doesn't really matter that much. Let's go to the Vaylantz main cards. This card is one of the biggest cards, and you kind of want to see this in your opening hand. It's a bit problematic. You would see it, or you would increase the chances to see this card a lot more if you played Electromite as well, since I tried to keep this deck profile as cheap as possible. We already went over the threshold of 4 Ultra Rares I usually try to keep, so I did not want to include this. But the next card you probably would want to include if you don't want to go for the whole Cyberstein, Exterior, whatnot combo is Heavy Metal Foes Electromite, because this card in general is just very good in like any Pendulum deck, and this deck here is no exception. This card searches your spell, a Vaylantz spell. We're still lacking one of them, but we will make do with what we have. And if it's been moved to another zone, then this card can also search your Vaylantz monster, which is very important. And it's part of the water engine of this kind of deck. Like there's a water, fire, and I think, is there another one? No, I think it's just water and fire. And this is the small level 2 of the fire one, which can move one card, one of your monsters, if this card, and they can all special summon themselves out of the pendulum zone, like into the zone that's adjacent to it, up in your monster zone. Then you have to move them to get the effects, and some effects are good, some effects are not that good, and so on. This card is one of your movers, basically. Doesn't do much else. Its other effect is okay, but the moving effect is what comes in most handy. We run one of Saion, because this card isn't too bad going second, but the whole coin flip effect makes it a bit, well, weird, because sometimes if you want to have the attack of a monster, you disable the non-existent effect, and sometimes if you want to get rid of the effect, you kind of, well, yeah, half its attack, which can be still okay, but since this card has like such a terrible attack value, it doesn't even matter like that much. Plus this card has to be special summoned for it, and it's okay, it's not great. But what you could do is technically you could use this card and Endymion the Magistus to go into Bahamut Shark and to go into Totally Awesome. So this is the thing you can keep in mind, because they're both water level 4s. We run triple Vaylantz Voltage Viscount, not necessarily because this card is any better, but you want to be able to get the fire monsters out, and if for some reason you don't get the right field spell, don't get any field spell up, then you want to have a fire Vaylantz monster on board, because that is what the big ones require you to have. So you can already see this water and fire. The ones are like more futuristic, the other ones are more living in the past, and they all have their kind of stuff, and if their field spells up on the field, then you can do stuff. Or if you have like one of the smaller ones, then you can special summon the bigger ones from your pendulum scale, and this is how it works. The effect of this card isn't too good. Sometimes it can come up for certain kind of things, but in this specific variant it doesn't do all that much, but it keeps the Vaylantz count up, and this card can special summon itself without any restrictions, and it can help you go into Beyond the Pendulum and all sorts of stuff. So this is quite nice. One special card that we run is Kaiden Kendo Spirit, because this card is a 9 scale, it's searchable, and after you pendulum summon, it removes itself on pendulum scale, which is very, very important, because this is kind of the way of how you summon your Vaylantz cards out, and that can be very, very important. Also, the effect isn't too terrible when you go second. If your opponent has like a full spell trap or a full monster zone, then you can send cards to the graveyard, which is quite nice. We run a triple of Nazuki the Ninja, because this card is also one of your movers. It's a level 6, which can come in handy for one of the fusion cards. Other than that, the effect is okay, like it's not great, but we make do with what we have. This one, on the other hand, the future one, the future level 6 one, is actually quite nice. because you can hopefully search one of Vaylantz monsters. Since we run quite a high count of Vaylantz cards, there will be a big chance that you excavate one of them unless you roll 1. That can be terrible, but mainly you'll be trying to dig for like this card, for example, or your fusion card, or for loads of different things, whatever you need at the time. But getting more bodies on board is already kind of important for this deck in the first place. We run 2 Hojo because you kind of want to cut at some places, and since you're going second, the Mega Fusion doesn't actually matter all that much. Going first, it's a nice disruption, but going second, it's more of a, oh, I couldn't finish my opponent, let's leave this up, or oh, there's something I can't quite get rid of and I have to use this for it, because you have enough like extra deck tools that usually help you, so it doesn't really matter overly much. Also, the effect of this card can recycle things like Senet Switch, which I think is probably what it's kind of meant to be. Because then you can use it again, because Senet Switch is a soft once per turn, so technically you can use it again to move stuff, which can also be quite nice. Vaylantz Dominator Duke, the card that I think most people would possibly like cut down to 2 or even cut down to 1, because it doesn't really do all that much, especially not going first, but going second it does stuff. It does stuff against back row, it does stuff against monsters, because you literally steal 1 monster, and that enables you to go into Beyond the Pendulum. And I think the monster doesn't even have to be in a zone where one of your monsters is in, like for example with a field spell. You can literally just, if this card is moved, then you can target one face-up monster in your opponent's main monster zone. Main monster zone, that's one of the requirements, but just take control of it, which is like so strong. But the effect is, if Vaylantz world, well, the future world is on the field, then that you can summon this card, or if a fire Vaylantz monster is on board. So this is what I've been talking about. The big ones have these kind of restrictions, so you can't just willy-nilly summon them, so this can be a bit of a problem, but usually you want to have like at least one of the lower ones, or the field spell. If you have none of them, then chances are that you might lose this duel in the first place. But technically, if you feel like you want to play rather like strong going second cards or hand traps, you could cut 1 or 2 of this card down. It is a strong card, but you don't necessarily need it at 3. So this is like another one that you could be cutting, but I like to have the Vaylantz count kind of high up, because there's so many different names, so many different levels, which also comes in handy with Beyond the Pendulum, which I'll tell you about in a second. And one of the things that you've probably already noticed is they all are Pendulum skill 1. So within their deck, it's quite hard to actually Pendulum summon. There's only one way, and that is using your extra deck monsters, because they are scale 10. So either your opponent has to destroy them, so they go into, by card effect if I'm not mistaken, and so they go into your Pendulum zones, or you have to place them when they face up in your extra deck, you link them off, and then I think you have one of your monsters can put them into your Pendulum zones. But that is so convoluted that we rely on the Spirit searching with Beyond the Pendulum, and then Pendulum summoning, because we are all under 9 scale. So that is actually the perfect card for this deck. You kind of think they made Vaylantz actually with keeping these kind of Spirit cards in the back of their mind, because it's like all relying on zones as well, and columns and whatnot, and also it works really well with the 9 scale as well. So who knows, maybe they had that in mind at Konami headquarters. Pawn of Prosperity at 1, it kind of clashes a bit with the Endymion card, because this card draws and you can't draw afterwards, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, you can't draw cards by card effects. Something that I tend to forget. I know the half damage kind of thing and the Bansho and extra deck, but this whole like you can't draw can be a bit of a pain in the ass. But yeah, it's 4 cards. You decide whatever you want to be using. So that is one of the things that you might need to look out for. Vaylantz Wars at 2. I tried it at 3 at one point, because we do not run one of the engines to search stuff with Small World, but Small World I think is mainly in there anyway to search stuff like usually Cyberstein, but it's quite easy to search like other kind of things. It works out with the types quite well, and you can quite easily search like starters. So Small World in general is like it's a good card in most decks if you have like specific cards that you want to be searching out. And Emancipator, for example, people used to be playing this card as well. But yeah, this card works with a lot of stuff. But since we don't play any of this, we have Vaylantz Wars at 2. You can do it. You can do it at 3. You can do it at 1. Depends on what your ratio of the field spell is. you kind of want to play each field spell at 2, that's why I feel like, because then you can use the effect technically twice if you don't earlier draw into stuff and whatnot, but usually you will be able to use it twice. Then since we're cutting down on rarity, I kind of went for this stuff in combination with the Magistus and hope that it's enough. Yeah, it is what it is. Wars has this whole thing that you could search a Senet Switch, which you usually kind of want to be doing, but the problem is sometimes you draw this card and search within Wars with your level 2. Bit problematic because obviously it's kind of like a brick because you'd rather search it usually, but it doesn't really matter all that much. This card is, I think, the least effective one. The problem with these ones is you cannot activate them unless you have another version like of the opposing one in your deck. So this is why you kind of want to have 2 and 2, because otherwise you can't, like if you draw both of them in your starting hand, then you cannot use them, which is very, very stupid and very, very annoying. You could try and cut them down to 1 if you really want to try it, if you really want to keep it really cheap, and I tried this for a while. It can work, but it's a bit annoying. Like this, it felt like it was a bit better, but not overly. Like it still gives you like another card to search, and you could still like trigger Vaylantz Wars a second time, because this card also has a graveyard effect, and that can in the grind game be kind of important. So having 3 felt a bit better in the end, but you can decide whatever you want to be doing. This one is the more important one because you can use this not with any Vaylantz monster in your effect, which is the problem why you don't want your opponent to have this, because any monster like that, if there's 2 cards in a field zone, which usually it will be because they activate each other, the turn player, like I said, your opponent could also, once it's their turn, can target 1 effect monster in the opponent's main monster zone in the same column as one of the monsters they control. It doesn't even have to be one of the Vaylantz monsters, so your opponent can actually use this. So you kind of might want to try and get rid of this. And then they place that opponent's monster face up as a continuous spell in their spell and trap card zone, which is funny because if the zone is occupied, you can destroy the occupying card, which is also some form of spell trap removal, which you can also use your Kaijus to get rid of important stuff. I think I played against Dark Magician one time and you get rid of Eternal Soul then, which is a bit funny. Senet Switch, move stuff, Forbidden Chalice, good going first, good going second on a budget. Infinite Impermanence, good going first, good going second in general. For the extra deck, we run 1 of this. It's not super duper key, like I don't really go into this card like overly all that much, but it is a strong card, so I would recommend running it. But if you want to keep it super mega cheap, then you could cut this one. I really like this one, could enable OTKs. I'm not just saying that because it got a royal finish of it. It actually does a lot of stuff, because you can summon it also not just by fusion summoning, but by having a level 5 or higher non-fusion Vaylantz monster. I don't know why they didn't just say level 6 or higher, because I don't think there is level 5 Vaylantz monsters, but Konami, in case they bring out a 5, so that still works. So it's like a tribute monster, I guess, was the kind of thing. Then we run rank 2s that were going second. We run 1 of the Nina Ruru, because this card can pop spell traps with Endymion engine. 1 Asophiel, good going second on a budget. Shogiru, because you have level 6s and you can easily go into this card, also good going second. You can easily go into rank 8s as well, where Draglubion comes in with Earth Dragon, and the other one, 1 Artemis, because this card works quite well with, well, gaining stuff from using the Magistus engine, at least another card in hand. 1 Cross Sheep, sometimes it comes up, Geonator Transverser, not that important. And the important card, which I preferred over Electromite in this case, because this card was in the pack, so most of you might actually have a copy. I had a copy, so this is why I tried it out with this card first. Plus, it's 2 effect monsters, including a pendulum monster, not 2 pendulum monsters, so that felt a bit better. Also, this card, first of all, searches your scale, which Electromite could, but what it also does is what most people will not be using a lot of the time, because usually this is more of a go first to build up pendulum boards kind of card. If 2 monsters with the different original levels are pendulum summoned at the same time to the zone this card points to, easily done in this deck, you can target 2 cards on the field, destroy them. First of all, obviously go in second, you nuke your opponent's board with this effect, very, very strong, and you can stop them from being able to use your field spell then, because it's on both sides of the field, so no matter where you activated it, you could get rid of your copy if you feel like you don't need it anymore the next turn, and stop your opponent from being able to use the effect to their own advantage. So that can be quite nice as well. Decode Talker, because you get this card for free, it's a nice link 3. Unicorn obviously is a better card, or, well, there's so many link 3s that you can be playing, that would be a tiny bit better, but this card has some protection at least, and this card can help you with OTKing, because it gets 1000 attack point boost, which makes it 3300 for a Link 3 is even better than a 10 yuan. So yeah, it does stuff. Sometimes Raster Liger, well, the very budget version of Access Code Talker, because you get this card in the starter deck, and it can pop stuff, and it also can gain attack, just a bit worse than Access Code Talker in both ways. But if you have Access Code Talker, play this. If you only have Raster Liger, I think Raster Liger works fine. It's not great, but it's not terrible. Other cards you could consider is Zeus, because you see you have access to lots of rank Xyz cards, but usually you don't overly go into them, but Zeus can be somewhat nice. Also clears the field spells as well, which isn't too terrible as well. Hope you enjoyed the deck profile. Leave a like, comment, subscribe, but most importantly, I hope you have a good day.